Have you ever felt mentally exhausted, even when nothing is actually happening in your life? Your body is still, but your mind is racing. You are not in danger, but your thoughts make you feel like you are. You replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, overthink decisions, and carry invisible pressure that no one else can see. And the worst part is, you think this is normal. But it's not. Ibn Arabi revealed a truth that most people never realize. The chaos you feel is not caused by life, it is caused by your identification with the voice inside your head. Because the moment you stop believing every thought, the storm loses its power. And what you are about to learn might completely change the way you experience your mind forever. 1. The storm exists because you believe every thought. The mind speaks constantly. It creates stories, fears, expectations, and endless imagined scenarios. And most people never question it. They treat every thought as truth. Every worry feels real. Every fear feels like a warning. Every negative idea feels like reality itself. But Ibn Arabi pointed toward a deeper understanding. He showed that thoughts are not truth. They are reflections of perception. They are shadows passing through awareness. And the moment you believe every thought without questioning it, you give it power over your inner state. The storm inside your mind is not created by life itself. It is created by your unquestioned belief in what your mind produces. You hear a thought, and instantly you react. You feel fear, and instantly you assume danger. You imagine a future, and instantly you suffer as if it has already happened. But what if the thought is just a passing cloud? What if the fear is just an illusion of the mind? The moment you begin to observe your thoughts instead of believing them, something shifts. The storm slows down. The noise becomes distant. And you begin to realize that you are not inside the storm. You are the awareness watching it. 2. You are not the mind, you are the witness. One of the most powerful and hidden teachings of Ibn Arabi is this: you are not your thoughts, your emotions, or the constant noise inside your head. You are the one who notices them. Think about it for a moment. If you can observe a thought, then that thought cannot be you. If you can feel an emotion and recognize it, then that emotion is something passing through you, not something that defines you. But most people never stop to see this clearly. They stay trapped inside their mind, reacting to every thought as if it is their identity. When the mind becomes anxious, they say, "I am anxious." When fear appears, they say, "I am afraid." When thoughts become chaotic, they believe their whole life is falling apart. They don't realize they are merging with the mind instead of watching it. But this is the illusion that creates suffering. The mind is something you experience, just like you experience sound, or weather, or passing moments. It is active, it changes, it moves constantly. But you are something deeper than that movement. There is a quiet awareness inside you that has always been present. It does not panic, it does not overthink, it does not get lost. Even in your worst moments, when your mind feels loud and out of control, this awareness is still there, simply watching. The shift happens when you stop saying "this is me" and start saying "this is something I am noticing." That small change creates space between you and your thoughts. And in that space, the intensity of the mind begins to fade. You don't have to stop the storm. You just have to stop standing inside it, because the storm cannot control the sky, and you are not the storm, you are the sky. 3. The more you resist the mind, the stronger it becomes. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to fight their own mind. They try to push thoughts away, silence emotions, and control every feeling that rises inside them. But instead of finding peace, they feel even more overwhelmed. This happens because resistance gives energy to what you are trying to escape. The moment you say, "I don't want to think this," your attention goes directly to that thought. The moment you try to avoid fear, your mind keeps bringing it back stronger. It is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a different approach. He did not teach people to fight the mind, but to understand it. Because the mind is not something that needs to be defeated, it is something that moves on its own when you stop interfering. Imagine your thoughts like waves in the ocean. If you try to stop the waves, you will exhaust yourself. But if you simply stand on the shore and watch them, you begin to notice something important. Every wave rises, and every wave falls on its own. Your thoughts work the same way. When you stop resisting them, they lose their intensity. When you stop reacting to every feeling, it begins to pass naturally. The mind starts to calm down, not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding it with struggle. Peace does not come from controlling the storm. It comes from no longer fighting it. 4. The illusion of control creates inner chaos. One of the deepest reasons your mind feels heavy, restless, and constantly overwhelmed is because it is trying to control something that was never meant to be controlled. The mind wants certainty. It wants to know what will happen next. It wants to predict outcomes, avoid pain, and secure a future where nothing goes wrong. And at first, this may seem useful. It feels like you are protecting yourself, preparing yourself, staying one step ahead of life. But slowly, this need for control turns into pressure. You start thinking about everything that could go wrong. You replay conversations, trying to fix what has already happened. You imagine future situations, trying to control how they will unfold. You try to manage people's opinions, their reactions, their behavior toward you. And without realizing it, your mind becomes a place of constant tension, because life does not follow your plans. No matter how much you think, no matter how much you prepare, no matter how much you analyze, there will always be uncertainty. There will always be things outside your control, and the more your mind tries to control those things, the more it begins to feel unstable. This is where inner chaos is born. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a truth that most people struggle to accept. Peace does not come from controlling life, it comes from trusting it. This does not mean becoming passive or careless. It means understanding the difference between what is in your control and what is not. Your actions are in your control. Your effort is in your control. Your intentions are in your control. But outcomes, reactions, timing, and the behavior of others are not. When you try to control what is not yours to control, your mind enters a loop. It keeps thinking, analyzing, worrying, and predicting, but never arriving at peace. It is like running on a treadmill, using all your energy but going nowhere. But something powerful happens when you begin to let go of this illusion. When you stop trying to control every outcome, your mind becomes lighter. When you stop forcing life to match your expectations, you feel less pressure. When you accept uncertainty instead of fighting it, your thoughts begin to slow down. You start to live more in the present moment instead of constantly trying to manage the future. You begin to act with clarity instead of fear, and slowly, the storm inside your mind begins to settle. Because control is not what brings peace, clarity is. And clarity comes when you stop trying to control everything and start allowing life to move as it is. The moment you release the need to control what you cannot control is the moment your mind finally begins to rest. 5. Your identity is the root of the storm. One of the most hidden reasons your mind never feels at peace is not your thoughts themselves, but the identity you have built around those thoughts. From a very young age, your mind starts creating a story about who you are. It collects experiences, judgments, memories, and opinions from others and slowly turns them into labels. These labels become your identity, and without realizing it, you begin to live inside them as if they are absolute truth. You tell yourself things like, I am not strong enough. I always overthink. I am someone who gets hurt easily. I am not confident. Or, I am just this kind of person. And the more you repeat these ideas, the more real they begin to feel. They stop being just thoughts and start becoming the way you see yourself. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a deeper reality. He showed that the self most people believe in is not their true essence. It is something constructed by the mind, shaped by experiences, and reinforced by repetition. It is a story, not a fixed truth. But the problem begins when you attach yourself to that story. The moment you believe, this is who I am, every thought becomes personal. Every fear feels like a threat to your identity. Every negative emotion feels like proof that something is wrong with you. And this is what creates the storm. Because now, the mind is not just producing thoughts, it is defending an identity. If your identity is, I am an overthinker, your mind will continue to overthink, because it is trying to stay consistent with what you believe about yourself. If your identity is "I am someone who struggles," your thoughts will keep finding problems, because the mind always tries to confirm the identity it holds. This is why the storm feels endless. You are not just experiencing thoughts, you are protecting a version of yourself that was never truly fixed to begin with. But something powerful happens when you begin to question this identity. Instead of saying, "This is who I am," you start asking, "Is this really me, or is this something I learned to believe?" Instead of holding on to labels, you begin to see them as temporary ideas that came and stayed only because you kept feeding them. And slowly, the grip begins to loosen. You realize that the identity you thought was permanent is actually flexible. It changes, it evolves. It was never as solid as your mind made it seem. And beneath all of that, there is something deeper. A presence that does not need labels. A part of you that exists before every story, before every belief, before every identity. This is your true self. It does not say, "I am this," or "I am that." It simply is. And when you begin to rest in that place, the mind loses its need to constantly define you. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer carry the same weight. They are no longer protecting an identity, so they begin to lose their urgency. The storm starts to fade, not because you forced it to stop, but because you removed its root. Because the storm was never just thoughts, it was the identity you built around them. And the moment you stop holding onto that identity so tightly is the moment your mind finally begins to feel free. 6. Silence is not the absence of thought, it is the absence of attachment. Most people misunderstand what true silence really is. They believe that peace will come when their mind finally stops thinking, when there are no more worries, no more doubts, no more noise. They imagine a state where the mind becomes completely empty, and they chase that state as if it is something they must achieve. But this chase itself becomes another form of noise, because the more you try to eliminate every thought, the more you become aware of them. The more you try to force your mind into silence, the more resistance you create. And slowly, what started as a desire for peace turns into frustration, because the mind does not behave the way you want it to. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a much deeper understanding of silence, one that most people overlook. He revealed that silence is not something you create by stopping thoughts. It is something you discover when you stop attaching yourself to them. This changes everything. Because now, the goal is no longer to fight the mind or control it. The goal becomes understanding your relationship with it. Thoughts will come. This is natural. The mind is designed to think, just like the heart is designed to beat. You cannot force it to stop completely, just like you cannot command your heartbeat to pause. But what you can change is how much importance you give to what the mind produces. Right now, most people are deeply attached to their thoughts. Every idea feels important. Every worry demands attention. Every emotion pulls them in. They listen to the mind as if it is always telling the truth, and because of that, they get carried away by every mental wave that rises. This attachment is what creates disturbance. It is not the thought itself that causes suffering. It is the way you hold on to it. Imagine hearing someone talking in the background. If you give it your full attention, it becomes loud and distracting. But if you do not engage with it, if you let it exist without reacting, it slowly fades into the background. It is still there, but it no longer controls your focus. Your thoughts work the same way. They only become powerful when you give them importance. When you attach meaning to them, when you follow them, analyze them, react to them, and build more thoughts on top of them. But what if you stopped doing that? What if you allowed thoughts to appear without chasing them? At first, it may feel strange. The mind will try to pull you back in. It will throw stronger thoughts, louder fears, more urgent worries, because it is used to being heard. It is used to being followed, and when you stop engaging, it reacts. But if you remain still, something begins to shift. You start noticing that thoughts come and go on their own. You do not need to push them away. You do not need to solve them immediately. You do not need to respond to every idea the mind produces. You begin to see that the mind is like a flowing stream, constantly moving, constantly changing, and your job is not to jump into the water every time something appears. Your job is simply to sit by the side and observe. This is where real silence begins. Not when the stream stops flowing, but when you stop jumping into it. Ibn Arabi described this as a shift in awareness, a movement from being lost in thoughts to being present with them. It is a subtle change, but it transforms your entire inner experience. Because now, thoughts are no longer controlling you. They are simply passing through you. You may still feel emotions. You may still have moments of doubt or fear, but they do not stay as long. They do not define your state. They do not pull you into long cycles of overthinking. Why? Because you are no longer attached. Attachment is what turns a single thought into a storm. It is what takes a small worry and expands it into hours of mental suffering. It is what makes a passing feeling feel permanent. When attachment is removed, thoughts lose their ability to grow. They appear and they disappear. And in between those thoughts, something becomes visible, a space, a quiet presence, a stillness that was always there, hidden beneath the noise. This stillness is not something you create, it is something you uncover. It has always been there, even when your mind was loud, even when your thoughts felt overwhelming. But you could not notice it because your attention was always captured by the movement of the mind. Now, as you begin to detach, this stillness becomes clearer. You start to experience moments where there is no urgency, no pressure, no need to react. You feel a sense of calm that does not depend on your thoughts being perfect. It exists even when the mind is active. This is true silence, not the absence of thought, but the absence of attachment to thought. And once you experience this, even for a brief moment, you realize something powerful. You realize that peace was never about controlling the mind. It was about understanding it. It was about changing your relationship with it. And the more you practice this, the deeper it becomes. You begin to move through life differently. Situations that once triggered you no longer have the same effect. Thoughts that once consumed you now pass more lightly. You become less reactive, less overwhelmed, and more present, not because life has changed, but because your connection to your thoughts has changed. And in that shift, something beautiful happens. The storm begins to fade. Not because the mind is gone, but because it no longer has control over you. Because silence was never something you had to create. It was something you had to stop interfering with. And the moment you stop attaching yourself to every thought is the moment you finally begin to hear the silence that was always within you. 7. The storm ends when you stop feeding it. There is something most people never realize about the chaos inside their mind. They believe the storm is happening to them. They believe it is something they have to fight, control, or escape from. But what they do not see is this simple truth. The storm continues because it is being fed. Every thought you follow, every fear you analyze, every worry you try to solve over and over again becomes fuel. The mind takes your attention, your focus, your energy, and uses it to grow stronger. And without realizing it, you keep giving it exactly what it needs to continue. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a truth that feels almost too simple to accept. He showed that what you continuously give your attention to expands, and what you stop feeding begins to fade. But most people do the opposite. A single thought appears, and they immediately engage with it. They question it, analyze it, build stories around it, and connect it to past experiences and future fears. One small idea becomes 10. 10 become 100. And suddenly, the mind feels out of control. But it did not happen instantly. It grew, step by step, through attention. Imagine a small fire. If you keep adding wood to it, it will grow into something powerful and difficult to control. But if you stop feeding it, it does not explode. It slowly begins to weaken, to shrink, and eventually, it burns out on its own. Your thoughts work in the same way. The storm in your mind is not sustained by thoughts alone. It is sustained by your constant participation in them. Every time you replay a situation in your head, you are feeding it. Every time you imagine a worst-case scenario, you are feeding it. Every time you try to figure everything out by thinking more and more, you are feeding it. And the mind loves this, because it survives through your attention. But here is where everything begins to change. The moment you become aware of this pattern, you gain power. Not the power to control every thought, but the power to choose where your attention goes. And this choice is everything. Because attention is energy. Where you place it determines what grows inside you. When a thought appears, you do not have to follow it. You do not have to respond to it. You do not have to give it meaning. You can simply notice it and let it pass. At first, this feels unnatural. The mind will try to pull you back in. It will tell you that this thought is important, that you need to solve it, that you cannot ignore it. It will create urgency, as if something bad will happen if you do not engage. But this is part of the pattern. The mind has been trained for years to operate this way, and now you are breaking that pattern, so it reacts. But if you stay aware, if you resist the urge to engage, something powerful begins to happen. 3. Thought loses strength. It does not disappear instantly, but it becomes lighter. It passes more quickly. And over time, the mind starts producing fewer intense thoughts, because it is no longer receiving the same level of attention. This is how the storm begins to weaken, not through force, but through lack of fuel. Ibn Arabi taught that awareness without attachment is the key. When you observe your thoughts without feeding them, you create a space where they cannot grow. They come and they go, without turning into something bigger. And in that space, you begin to experience something different. You begin to feel moments of quiet. Moments where your mind is not pulling you in every direction. Moments where you are simply present, without needing to fix, solve, or control anything. These moments may be small at first, but they grow. Because now, instead of feeding the storm, you are feeding awareness. Instead of strengthening chaos, you are strengthening stillness. And slowly, your inner world begins to change. You realize that you do not need to solve every thought to feel peace. You do not need to understand every fear. You do not need to control every outcome. You only need to stop giving your energy to what disturbs you. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing not to get lost in unnecessary mental noise. Because there is a difference between responding to life and being consumed by your thoughts about life. Most people live in the second state. They are not experiencing life directly. They are experiencing their thoughts about it. And those thoughts create layers of stress, fear, and confusion that were never part of the original moment. But when you stop feeding those layers, life becomes simpler, clearer, lighter. You begin to respond instead of react. You begin to act with awareness instead of impulse. You begin to experience moments fully, without carrying the weight of endless thinking. And this is where real peace begins to grow. Not because your mind has become perfect, but because it no longer controls you. The storm does not need to be destroyed. It only needs to be unfed. And the moment you truly understand this, everything shifts. You stop chasing peace as something far away. You stop fighting your mind as if it is your enemy. You simply become more aware of where your energy is going, and you begin to take it back, because the storm was never stronger than you. It was only stronger than your awareness. And now that you see it clearly, it begins to fade, slowly, naturally, until one day, you notice something you never thought was possible. The storm is gone. Not because you forced it to stop, but because you finally stopped feeding it. 8. You suffer more in imagination than in reality. There is a silent habit inside your mind that creates more pain than most real-life problems ever could. It is not what is happening around you. It is what your mind is constantly imagining about what could happen. Most people are not suffering because their life is falling apart in this moment. They are suffering because their mind is projecting futures that do not exist, replaying situations that are already over, and creating stories that feel real, even though they have not happened. You imagine rejection before anyone rejects you. You imagine failure before you even begin. You imagine loss before anything is actually gone. And then you feel the emotions as if those imagined situations are already real. This is how the mind quietly creates suffering. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a powerful realization. Much of human suffering does not come from reality itself. It comes from the way the mind interprets and imagines reality. And once you begin to see this clearly, everything starts to shift. Think about it. Right now, in this exact moment, how many of your worries are actually happening? Not what might happen later, not what could go wrong, not what your mind is predicting, but right now, in reality. For most people, the answer is simple. Very little. Yet the mind does not stay in reality. It moves constantly into the future, creating possibilities, building scenarios, and preparing for problems that may never exist. And each time it does this, your body reacts, your emotions respond. Your heart feels heavy, your mind feels overwhelmed. Not because life is attacking you, but because your imagination is. This is one of the most powerful illusions of the mind. It makes you believe that thinking about a problem is the same as solving it. It makes you feel like you are preparing yourself, protecting yourself, staying alert, but in truth, you are exhausting yourself, because most of what you are thinking about is not real. It is possibility, not reality. And your mind does not always know the difference. When you imagine something strongly enough, your body reacts as if it is happening. Your heart rate changes, your emotions shift, your focus narrows. And suddenly, you are living inside a mental world that has no physical existence, yet feels completely real. This is how the storm grows so quickly, not from what is actually happening, but from what your mind keeps creating. Ibn Arabi taught that clarity comes when you begin to separate what is real from what is imagined. This is not about ignoring your thoughts. It is about seeing them for what they truly are. When a thought appears, you ask yourself a simple question. Is this happening right now, or is this something my mind is creating? This question alone has the power to break the cycle. Because the moment you realize that most of your stress is coming from imagination, you begin to step out of it. You stop reacting automatically. You stop treating every thought as urgent. You create a pause between what the mind says and how you respond. And in that pause, awareness begins to grow. You begin to notice patterns. You notice how the mind jumps to worst-case scenarios. You notice how it exaggerates small problems. You notice how it keeps replaying the same thoughts, as if repeating them will somehow make them easier to control. But instead of getting pulled in, you start watching. And this changes everything. Because once you see the pattern, you are no longer trapped inside it. You begin to understand that not every thought deserves your attention. Not every worry needs to be solved. Not every imagined future needs to be lived in your mind before it even arrives. You start returning to the present moment. Not because you are forcing yourself to, but because you realize that this is the only place where life is actually happening, right here, right now. And in this moment, something becomes clear. The weight you were carrying was never fully real. It was built by thoughts about the future. It was strengthened by repeated imagination. It was kept alive by your constant attention. And the moment you stop feeding those imagined scenarios, they begin to lose their power. This does not mean you will never think about the future again. It means you will stop living in it before it happens. You will still plan. You will still act. You will still move forward, but you will do it with clarity, not fear, with awareness, not anxiety, because there is a difference between thinking about the future and being consumed by it. Most people are consumed by it, but you are learning to step out of that cycle. Ibn Arabi reminds us that reality is always simpler than the mind makes it. Life in the present moment is rarely as overwhelming as the mind's projection of what could happen, and when you return to that simplicity, you begin to feel something different. You feel grounded. You feel present. You feel lighter. Because you are no longer carrying the weight of things that do not exist. You are no longer suffering from imagined problems. You are simply living in the only moment that is real. And from this place, your mind begins to calm down naturally. The storm loses its intensity. The noise becomes quieter, not because you forced it to stop, but because you stopped believing every imagined story it creates. And in that clarity, you realize something that changes everything. You were never meant to live inside your imagination. You were meant to live inside your reality. And the moment you return to it is the moment the storm inside your mind finally begins to fade. 9. You keep the storm alive by replaying the past. There is another hidden habit that quietly keeps the storm inside your mind alive, even when nothing is happening in your present moment. It is not the future this time, it is the past. The mind has a tendency to go back. It revisits conversations, mistakes, moments of embarrassment, pain, regret, and things you wish had gone differently. It replays scenes again and again, as if repeating them will somehow change the outcome. You think about what you should have said. You imagine how things could have gone better. You relive the pain of what someone did. And every time you revisit these memories, you feel the emotions again, as if it is happening right now. This is how the past becomes a present experience. Not because it is still happening, but because your mind keeps bringing it back to life. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a deep truth that most people overlook. The past has no power on its own. It cannot hurt you again unless you keep reconnecting with it through thought. But most people do not see it this way. They believe they are trying to understand the past, to learn from it, or to find closure. And sometimes, reflection is useful. But there is a point where reflection turns into repetition, and repetition turns into suffering, because the mind does not know when to stop. It keeps replaying the same memory, hoping for a different emotional result. But every time you replay it, you strengthen the connection. You make the memory feel more real, more important, more painful than it actually is, and slowly, it becomes part of your identity. You start saying things like, "This always happens to me," or "I can't forget what they did," or "That moment ruined everything." And without realizing it, you carry the past into every new situation. This is how the storm continues, not because life is still hurting you, but because you are reliving what has already ended. Imagine watching the same painful scene in a movie over and over again. Each time you watch it, you feel the emotion again. But the scene itself has not changed. It is your repeated attention that keeps the emotion alive. Your mind works in the same way. Every memory you replay becomes stronger, not because it is important, but because you keep feeding it. Ibn Arabi taught that true freedom does not come from erasing the past, but from changing your relationship with it. You do not need to forget what happened. You do not need to pretend it did not affect you. But you do need to stop living inside it. Because the moment you recognize that the past is only existing through your current thoughts, you begin to take your power back. You start to see that every time the memory appears, you have a choice. You can follow it, analyze it, and get pulled into it again. Or you can notice it, acknowledge it, and let it pass without engaging. At first, this feels difficult. The mind will try to convince you that this memory is important, that you need to resolve it, that you cannot let it go. It will bring up emotions, trying to pull you deeper into the story. But if you stay aware, something begins to change. You realize that the memory itself is not hurting you. Your continued attention to it is. And once you see this clearly, you begin to loosen your grip. You stop giving the past the same level of importance. You stop replaying it every time it appears. You stop building new thoughts on top of old memories. And slowly, the emotional intensity begins to fade. Not because the past changed, but because your connection to it changed. Ibn Arabi reminds us that life is always happening now. The present moment is the only place where you can act, feel, and experience reality directly. But when your attention is constantly pulled into the past, you lose that connection. You are no longer living your life, you are reliving your memories. And this creates a heavy, repetitive cycle where the mind never feels free. But the moment you return to the present, something shifts. You begin to notice what is actually in front of you. You begin to feel moments without the weight of old stories. You begin to experience life as it is, not as it was. And this is where healing truly begins. Not in endless thinking, but in letting go of the need to keep going back. This does not mean the past disappears completely. It means it loses its control over you. It becomes something that happened, not something that is still happening inside you. And when that shift happens, the storm begins to quiet down. Because one of its strongest sources, the repeated replaying of the past, is no longer feeding it. You are no longer carrying yesterday into today. You are no longer turning memories into present suffering. You are simply allowing what has already ended to remain in the past. And in doing so, you create space. Space for new experiences. Space for clarity. Space for peace. Because the storm cannot survive without repetition. And the moment you stop replaying the past is the moment your mind finally begins to move forward. 10. Peace begins when you stop trying to become someone else. There is one final layer to the storm inside your mind that most people never question because it feels normal. It feels like something you should be doing. It feels like growth. but in reality, it is one of the deepest sources of inner chaos. It is the constant pressure to become someone else. From the moment you become aware of yourself, the mind begins to compare. It looks at others, at their success, their confidence, their lifestyle, their personality, and it quietly creates a gap between who you are and who you think you should be, and that gap becomes tension. You start telling yourself that you are not enough as you are. You feel like you need to improve, fix, upgrade, and transform yourself into a better version before you can finally feel peace. You believe that happiness is waiting somewhere in the future, in a version of you that does not exist yet. So the mind starts working. It analyzes your flaws, it highlights your weaknesses, it reminds you of your past mistakes. It shows you everything you are not, compared to everything you think you should be. And slowly, this creates a constant sense of dissatisfaction. No matter what you achieve, it is not enough. No matter how much you grow, there is always something missing. Because the mind is not actually looking for peace, it is chasing an ideal. Ibn Arabi pointed toward a truth that feels uncomfortable at first, but deeply liberating once understood. He showed that the more you try to become something other than what you are in this moment, the more you disconnect from your true nature. This does not mean you should stop growing. It means you need to understand the difference between growth and rejection of yourself. Most people are not growing from acceptance. They are growing from self-rejection. They believe something is wrong with them, and they are trying to fix it. They believe they are incomplete, and they are trying to complete themselves. They believe they are behind, and they are trying to catch up, and this mindset keeps the storm alive. Because now, every thought becomes a reminder of what you are lacking. Every comparison becomes a source of pressure. Every moment becomes something you need to improve instead of something you can experience. You are no longer living. You are constantly trying to become. And in that constant becoming, peace keeps moving further away. But something shifts when you begin to question this pattern. Instead of asking, "How can I become better?" you begin to ask, "Why do I feel like I am not enough right now?" This question changes the direction of your awareness, because it takes you out of the endless chase and brings you back to the present moment. You begin to see that the feeling of not being enough is not coming from reality. It is coming from the mind's comparison, and comparison is endless. No matter how much you achieve, the mind will always find someone ahead of you, someone better, someone more successful, someone more confident. And if you keep measuring yourself this way, you will never arrive at peace, because the goal keeps moving. Ibn Arabi reminds us that your true nature is not something you need to create. It is something you need to recognize. You are not incomplete. You are not lacking. You are not something that needs to be fixed before you can feel whole. The only thing creating that feeling is the story your mind keeps repeating. And the moment you stop believing that story, something begins to relax inside you. You start to feel less pressure, less urgency, less need to prove something. You begin to move through life with a different energy. You still grow, you still improve, you still take action. But now, it comes from a place of clarity, not from a place of deficiency. You are no longer running away from yourself. You are moving with yourself, and this changes everything. Because now, your mind is not constantly searching for what is missing. It begins to settle into what is already here. You start to notice moments more deeply. You start to feel your life instead of constantly evaluating it. You begin to experience peace, not as something you will achieve later, but as something that exists right now when you stop chasing another version of yourself. This does not mean you will never feel doubt again. It does not mean you will never compare again, but it means those thoughts will no longer control you. You will see them for what they are, patterns of the mind, not truths about who you are. And when you stop attaching yourself to those patterns, they begin to lose their power. Ibn Arabi teaches that the journey is not about becoming something new. It is about removing what is false. It is about letting go of the layers of comparison, expectation, and self-judgment that have covered your natural state. And beneath all of that, there is a quiet sense of completeness. A feeling that you are already enough, not perfect, not finished, but enough. And from that place, something powerful happens. The storm begins to calm, Because the mind no longer needs to chase. It no longer needs to prove. It no longer needs to compare. It begins to rest. Not because everything in your life is perfect, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. And this is where true peace begins, not in becoming someone else, but in finally accepting who you already are. Because the moment you stop trying to become a different person is the moment you finally meet your true self. And in that meeting, the storm inside your mind comes to an end. The storm inside your mind was never as powerful as it felt. It only felt powerful because you were inside it, believing every thought, chasing every fear, holding on to every memory, and trying to control what was never meant to be controlled. But now you see it differently. Ibn Arabi did not teach people how to fight their mind. He showed them how to step beyond it. Because the truth is, your mind was never the problem. Your attachment to it was. You were feeding the storm with attention, strengthening it with resistance, and keeping it alive by holding on to the past, fearing the future, and trying to become someone else. But the moment you stop,